on the front line, which is learning from the experience from China, you're on the right call. If you're on the cooking channel, then you're on the wrong call. Anyway, we have very happy to have everybody here today. We have about 83 people on the call, and I will say buongiorno, bonjour, buenos dias, and good morning. So today we're going to be reviewing some learning that we had from our partners in China, which we thought would be helpful for those of us who are at various stages of COVID-19. And on the front line is a weekly program at Tuesdays at 9 o'clock East Coast time. And next week, we're going to be looking at leading retail into profitability. And we see there are 10 trends driving the opportunity in retail. And we'll give you some good news about halfway through the presentation. If you would like to register for next week, please, there's the URL. So please register. If you could please mute yourselves, that would be terrific. And also the video part as well. Thank you. So we're all here because of this unfortunate occurrence that we're all 185 nations are dealing with. And what we thought we would do is talk about the Chinese experience because the Chinese are really at the cutting edge of COVID-19 in terms of the behavior. And so they're probably the most advanced country right now, and probably maybe 2 months ahead of the US. And so we're very, very happy to share some of this. My name is Dan Hodges. I'm the founder of Retail Store Tours. We have 15 different cities that we operate. We're actually doing virtual store tours, and also sim tours, which we work at large conferences like NRF, NAB, and so forth. So our key objective today is to learn insights from the Chinese experience, understanding what the new normal is and how does your business respond, and then next steps. So Retail Store Tours has a very unique perspective in that we have basically people on the ground around the world. So the information that I'm sharing with you, and the reason why I wanted to share this information is because I'm not finding this information anywhere else. So now there is certainly lots of things to look at, but there actually is a sunny side to this too, which is in the US, there are some categories that are doing well. And interestingly enough, it almost mimics the numbers in China. So home furnishings, people are doing it their home, so they're buying furniture, they're trying to stay fit. Supermarkets increases are anywhere from 5 to 200%, so that's in alignment. Cosmetics, looking beautiful and staying beautiful, and fashion, and even jewelry and watches are starting to come back a little bit. So here's the pattern, and it looks like it's fairly a global pattern. So what are our recommendations? It looks like from all experts that until we have the vaccine, it won't be business as normal. So if you have a brand, virtualize your brand. If you're a conference company, virtualize your conference. Pandemic planning should be part of your go-to-market, and having alternative delivery systems is key. Although we're focused on the shock and of the current situation, there is a potential market for AR and VR that will probably be coming online. If you haven't maximized your supply chain or your digital marketing, certainly now's a good time to do it. And next week we'll talk about new product opportunities. So we're really, really fortunate because Kevin, Catherine, and Sharon have recorded messages for us. We did that because sometimes the connection from New York to China can be a little shaky. So we took care of that. The CCFA is a very unique organization. For those in the U.S. or in Europe, it's like a combination of the National Retail Federation and the National Restaurant Association and the Convenience Store Association. So it's like three different associations in one. And the members are, pretty diverse, from Walmart to McDonald's to IBM. So it's a pretty good cross section of the marketplace. So when Sharon is the co-founder of Shakara, and also our lead in China. When Sharon and I were at the Starbucks Roastery, this was sort of how it looked. And sort of now the Starbucks experience is a little bit different in that what you're doing now is you're ordering and basically just showing up and picking up. However, if you want to, buy something in Starbucks, or sit in Starbucks, you need to get online and take a seat. So anyway, the questions that I asked Kevin were, and the things that would probably concern a lot of us on the call here today are, what are the best practices for retailers to deal with COVID-19? And I thought the first place to start would be Catherine. Now, Catherine is an executive at the company is basically, it's T11. And I love T11 because it's one of my favorite supermarkets, because basically what they've done is it's a software company that basically built a supermarket. Interesting perspective. And this is Catherine, a little bit earlier from the T11 market in Beijing.
Hello, I'm Catherine from T11 Food Market. Now I'm reporting in our store located in Beijing. When shoppers come to T11, the number of customers went down for the first 2 weeks since the outbreaks. But went back to normal in the late February, and it's totally back to normal as usual for now. People are still wearing masks while going outside. Meanwhile, we shut down our restaurant in the store during February, but reopened it in March. We leave 2 meters between two tables for customer safety. But for now, it's already back to normal, but people will only take off their masks before dining. In early February, we control the entering customer number to save more rooms for each other, and we take customer temperature before their entry. And for now, it's already back to normal. Thank you.
So what Catherine said when we spoke to her is that it's sometimes hard to hear with the audio, but they have 2 restaurants. They had 2 restaurants, and they've just reopened the restaurants, and they're keeping the distance of 2 meters. Now this is just before I get into the narrative. This is a supermarket, and you can see that everyone's wearing a mask. The cashier is wearing gloves. They have a sign which is basically 1 meter, and we're seeing this very, very common in the U.S. And as I mentioned earlier, the supermarkets had 30 to 150% increases, and that was primarily initially because all the restaurants were closed. Now, when we talk about China, we talk about China in 2 periods. We talk about China prior to March 15th, and then we talk about China post March 15th. So initially, and this may have been pretty much universal for all of us who've been impacted, but there were shortages of labor in the supermarkets. So as the restaurants closed, the restaurant laborers flipped over to the retail market to make up for the supermarket, to make up for the lack of labor. And this cooperation really helped get the labor to where it needed to be, because very much like if you're in France or Spain or US, all the restaurants are closed. So the first issue was a bit tricky because there was employee protection and there was an initial labor shortage. So the first thing the retailers did was they tried to protect their employees as much as possible. But the issue is when the employees became infected, and then the customers came back and they were infected, so they had to close the store down. So they had to sort of reboot. And the one thing that we're seeing in the U.S., and I'm sure you're seeing it in Spain and Brazil and New Zealand and Mexico, is that it's really important to protect the employees. So in the U.S., in the past 7 days, all the employees are wearing masks. You are social distanced into the stores. There's a plexiglass screen between you and the cashier. So there, a lot of adjustments quickly. One of the things that was really strained was, and this is global, was the supply chain. And so, I guess a lesson for those retailers on the call is to really diversify your supply chain and to have alternatives and think about your relationship with DHL or Federal Express or so forth, UPS. The third one, I think everybody experienced this, every country, was the panic buying. So the stores tried to prepare with large amounts of foods. So at the beginning, because the restaurants were closed, really they snapped up everything, and then cooking products. But then what's interesting about the Chinese marketplace is that there was especially a run on condiments and dressing. So I'd like to dig into that a little bit because that's interesting. Last but not least is to innovate according to the changes of consumer needs. So, due to the stay-at-home policies, more consumers tended to use home deliveries, and home delivery numbers, we'll get to that in a second, were absolutely crushed. Now, I put that screen inside that PC just to show you that what we're beginning to see in China and around the world is a lot of design innovations for masks. So, if you're looking for a business opportunity, maybe it's mask design, but certainly that's emerging in China, and you can only imagine how that will spread globally. It's very similar to when I was at Nokia in 2007, the Brazilians market started to put coverings on smartphones. And that kind of started the whole smartphone covering craze. So again, not all this is like doom and gloom. And I share the Hermes with you for that purpose. So the question I asked Kevin was, are people shopping in stores? How are department stores different from malls? Are people dining in restaurants? But that particular store, Hermes in Shanghai, had a one-day record in the history of luxury in China. I think not yesterday, but last Monday, when they opened up, they had $1.7 million worth of sales, which is off the charts. So I do think, it's important to look at a bigger picture, and generally those people who've looked a little deeply think that there will be a retail rebound similar to this when it actually hits. We're still in the first phase, which is, before March 15th. Everybody was going to, the hypermarkets, a lot of community supermarkets because of the proximity. The department stores, the shopping centers are closed pretty much. And even when they opened, post March 15th, initially there wasn't that much traffic. And, they're only basically seeing 10% of sales. So rather than, me talk about how things may or may not be in China, I asked Sharon Shi to do a little bit of a walk around so we could just take a look at, how things are in China right now. And if I could find that video, I would be happy to show it to you. So let me just bear with me for 1 second. And there she is. So here we go. And we'll put Kevin away for a little bit later. Kevin will put you over there. There you go. And Sharon, go ahead.
Hi, this is Sharon Shi for retail stores in China. And we're reporting on the situation for retail stores in China at the moment. So the situation of China has improved greatly, and the stores are beginning to open up. Life is slowly getting back to normal, and we are taking this one day at a time. We've seen since the start of the virus outbreak, Chinese people have been relying on e-commerce more than ever, from daily grocery shopping to social events. We're seeing how brands and businesses are being innovative to engage with their customer online during this crisis time. We'll continue to keep you updated on the latest trends and words from China. Thank you.
Great. So you can see there's a sense of, from the earlier pictures I was showing you from before March 15th and, the post period, it's looking a little bit, like normal. In fact, according to the CCFA statistics, about 95% of the supermarkets are back online and shopping centers and stores are about 85%. Kevin will comment about this in a minute. So on the catering industry, the first phase before March 15th, again, restaurants were closed and only a few restaurants provided home delivery. But after March 15th, restaurants have reopened. The customers aren't coming back as much, but certainly the takeout business is robust. So on the other hand, now just this picture is not a photo crop. This is actually a picture of people eating in a restaurant. And so what they've done is no more than 3 people sitting at a table. And restaurants are selling ready to eat products, but sales are only between 10 and 40% of what they used to be. And you can, sort of see the impact of social distancing at a restaurant in there. So I'm going to switch over to Kevin. And again, Kevin has been extraordinarily gracious and very, very informative as to what he's seeing and what the members are seeing. And so Kevin will sort of outline to you how he sees it and some of the data he's gotten.
Before March 15, everyone will go to hypermarket and supermarket to shop, but most department store and shopping center are required to close. Even when department store and shopping center open, there is no traffic. The sales fell dramatically. Most companies sold less than 10% of past. After March 15, the pandemic in China has gradually ceased. Most of the previously closed store has been reopened. According to our statistic, the opening rate of China's supermarket industry has reached to 95%. And the number of department store and shopping center has recovered to 85%. Although the enterprise has been gone to fully resumed business, it takes time for consumer confidence to recover. And the traffic and the sales of department store and the shopping center has only recovered to 13 to 40% of normal. And the challenges are still great. On the catering industry, before March 15, the restaurants were closed. Only a few restaurants provide home delivery service through the online platform. After March 15, the restaurant has been reopened, but most consumers did not come back. On the other hand, the government requires that no more than 3 people sit at one table. The restaurants are still starting to sell ready-to-eat products, but the sales are only 10 to 40% of what they used to be.
So what we're seeing in the US right now is that many of the restaurants in the New York metro area are surviving, and surviving is a word, an accurate word, based on the takeout. So they're getting by, they're not making money, but they're actually getting by. So the question is, I asked Kevin next, was how did the pandemic affect China's retail market, and then online, and then brick and mortar? So affected by again, in this early period, China's total retail sales fell by about 21%. However, the supermarkets and hypermarkets perform well, as they perform well in Italy and Brazil and Mexico and the United States. Sale of supermarket fresh goods, vitamins as well, increased very, very greatly. So people are really switching to fresh, nutritious foods. Platforms, again, China is very supply chain centric. So companies like Freshippo, Tmall, Alibaba, JD.com, they have mini warehouses within the city. So they're actually able to handle, but even they were challenged by the surge in orders. And brick and mortar stores, I mean, the home delivery grew as high as 200%. So, whether, you're a big store or a small store, it's really those that had small pre-positioned warehouses did much better. So as Kevin mentioned, the shopping centers and specialty stores are seeing really minimal type of growth. In fact, the Rainbow department store in South China was only really at 10% of its sales through online platforms because the offline stores have been closed. Now, I guess there is a silver lining or a good piece of news, let's say. So those companies really forced by the pandemic that were very reluctant to implement supply chain and digital transformation are no longer. So those that have encountered a lot of internal resistance are no longer doing that because the lifeline, if your digital marketing was not up to where it should be, if you weren't optimized for mobile, if your supply chain was maybe less efficient, you really felt it. And so those companies, so there's a massive amount of spending right now to correct that. So the next thing, and all of us have our own version of this because, but again, how did the Chinese consumer behavior change? So what you see there, and what you've seen throughout the entire presentation, there is a temperature sensor. And so this gentleman is making sure that that couple, the mother with the child, aren't sick before they go in. There are changes in consumer behavior. Again, people, in a nutshell, are purchasing more basic and staples and doing a lot through home delivery service. Also, China has, through the WeChat app, they have special buying channels. So if you're part of a buying group, you can get discounted prices on fresh foods through this group buying. So that's very unique to the Chinese market. Third, because of the continuing impact again, the Chinese have had it longer than most countries, expectations for future income declined. Although I must say that the latest reports from McKinsey are a little bit updated. So for example, the consumer confidence in February in the Chinese market was 31%. And as of last week, it's 56. So this constant negative news that you get really suppresses shopping. But when the things start to pick up, people get that cheery optimism that's needed to drive the economy. So really it's 2 or 3 months impact, and the psychology and consumer behavior changed. And so people wanted nutritious food versus sort of frivolous food. And, people also wanted to improve their home setting because they're kind of stuck home. Kevin thinks that this change will last for a long time. Again, they're about a month or 6 weeks ahead of everybody. The restaurants have reopened, but in the post-March 15th period, but really it's not, the market has not recovered. So the question I asked him were, are people really wearing masks and gloves? And are people shopping differently? And he said, yep, everyone is wearing a mask. And here in the New York metro area, everyone is wearing a mask. So that's universal. I'm sure in your markets it's the same. There have been changes in supermarket behavior. There are fewer people. They are queued going into the supermarket. And we're seeing that here in the New York metro area already. So things are changing quickly. I think the last question was, what can we learn from the new strategies tested by China and even during Nike? So Kevin surveyed his membership for us. So thank you, Kevin. And in general, what he found was their sales, obviously fell sharply during the pandemic. Although some brands have begun to fully get back to work, the consumption patterns are far from recovery. And, you know, the department stores are also lagging a bit. He also said, I know that there are some brands that because previously their digital capability is strong through the use of digital tools and optimization. So those that were digital are doing well. I mean, Amazon, obviously Costco, online, Walmart are all doing gangbusters. So the question is, and we're almost out of time, but hopefully this is useful information. What does the new normal look like? And again, we'll talk about this in more detail next week. But it really boils down to responsible retail. I see in Brazil, Carrefour is doing social distancing. They're doing the same thing with the temperature scanners. This is Beijing last week, you know, people waiting for the bus. So, yep, people are wearing a mask. I can't see anybody there that's not wearing a mask. So that's pretty universal. People are trying to keep their distance, although that could be a challenge. That's a great particular breeding ground for COVID-19. So maybe it's best to walk if you can. People are keeping their distance at the great consternation of the restaurant industry. So hopefully there'll be more creative solutions in that area. Obviously people are wearing gloves. I don't see this so much in China, but certainly here, everyone's wearing gloves. Obviously simple things like washing your face. So anyway, so this is sort of the new normal. I have the young lady with the mask on because obviously it serves a couple of purposes, right? If you're sick, you don't spread it as much, and it keeps a barrier. Anyway, so we'd love any feedback via email after this. You know, future programs, you know, we do have next Tuesday at 9 o'clock, leading retail into profitability, 10 trends driving opportunity. And I guess we have time for a couple of questions. Again, the objective of this was to, I realized about 2 weeks ago that the information that that I was getting from China could be helpful for South Africa, which is very far behind, Mexico, which hasn't really got the brunt of it yet. I know Brazil's in a bit of a lockdown. Australia, New Zealand, Australia certainly is getting hit. New Zealand, not so much. And Sweden looks like it's coming out of it. So again, the objective here is to share the information. It's one of these situations where these types of information exchanges are useful because it's you know, various best practices are out there, and it's best to know firsthand. Anyway, I do have time for a question if you have a question, or if you could just send me a chat. If not, if you can send me questions afterwards, we will be happy to respond to you. Okay, well, it is a quiet group, and I can't blame you because some of you are in Asia and it's very, very late. And so anyway, appreciate you you coming today. And there are some questions. Okay, so we'll get the questions. Okay. Yeah, no, I agree, Bob. Hermes is an outlier, but certainly the fact is that the facts are the facts. They got the numbers. So no, I agree with you, Bob. It was certainly an outlier. Oh, the question is, yeah. So from Pam, yeah, you notice in one of the photos of people wearing plastic coats and it wasn't raining. Yes, there was a feeling that people were protecting themselves with the plastic. So yes, Pam, that was correct. And we're also actually happy to share this with you, so we can share this recording with you. So just sign up, give us your email, and we're happy to send it to you. And and if you have any comments about the content or what you'd like to see next week, because we do think that probably over the next, I'd say the next 6 months, these types of sort of mini briefings will be helpful. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you and to spend time with you. And I don't see any more questions. So we will call it a day. Thanks very much. Have a great week.